Welcome to the Payment Strategy Show. I'm Becky Kopplin, VP of Payments at Rainforest. We help software platforms embed payment processing into their core product to grow revenue and improve customer retention. And I am very excited today to have Jacob Olins with me. Jacob is SVP and GM of Fintech and Strategic Partnerships at WorkWave. They are an end-to-end software platform for field and mobile services businesses. Jacob, thank you so much for joining me.
It's great to be here, Becky. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I've mentioned this a few times on the show before, and if you've met me in person, I also say this a lot, but I have a theory that no one gets into payments on purpose, and once you're here, you never leave. So let's test the theory. How did you get into payments?
I definitely fit into that mold. I left college. I wanted to work for a bank because I had heard that they had good jobs and maybe something about that's where the money is. I lucked into a group that was focused on payments. It was at Citibank. It was kind of like a reaction to a lot of institutional client excitement around the PayPal and eBay merger. And these big Citibank institutional clients were like, "Hey, that seems cool. They seem to have figured out something here. How do we do this in our industries?" And so I kind of got put into the healthcare payments vertical, working with big health insurers and providers. And yeah, haven't looked back.
No, I love that. I love that. So you got thrown into payments like most of us do, kind of unknowingly, but tell me more. Where did your career kind of take you from there?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was sort of like a startup within a big financial institution. It was exciting to be learning about payments. Didn't know that was an industry at all. Also very much a product management focus. Hey, how do we solve some new problems for these big clients? And so I sort of spent the first half of my career at large, maybe more legacy financial institutions. Spent some time at Citi in this role. Moved to Verifone, big payment terminal provider that was really working on its transition from hardware provider, pure play sort of hardware provider, had done a lot of M&A and was trying to move into be more of a software and services company. And then, while that was happening, Verifone was sort of very much getting disrupted by Square. And so I started paying a lot of attention to Square. And one of the things that I saw them doing that was just seemed so different was the way that they were providing payments and financial services really within the context of what the end customer was trying to do. I remember seeing a interview, and I guess it was a product presentation with Sarah Fryer. She was the CFO of Square at the time. She was announcing Square Capital. That my mind was blown. I was like, holy cow,
Yeah.
that's how you do lending. I was used to being at these big financial institutions, and the amount of time you're spending just gathering context to try to underwrite is crazy. You can never get a deal done. And
Massive
if you're
forms and fill out all 180 fields and submit your life story and paperwork. And here, Square came along
100%.
and you're like, here's money.
Yeah,
It was
100%. Right.
wild.
And you're you don't even know what these businesses really do. So you're underwriting such a big story. You've got so little context, and Square it's just oh, we literally know everything that they're doing. We're in the flow of funds already. We're going to pay ourselves back. So it just, it was just the perfect model of hey, how do we take these kind of financial services that are really reserved for, large, sophisticated businesses, apply that to small businesses, do it in context without a lot of onboarding, provide them something when they need, as they need it, and securitize ourselves in a much better way. So that was kind of a big aha moment for me. This whole industry is changing, and I want to get to that side of it. But I spent a little bit more time in with the old guard. I moved over to JP Morgan, got my stripes on the issuing and treasury side, I would say. And then ultimately had an opportunity to join a company called EPOS now, which is a Square Toast competitor, really one of the leaders in the UK, helped build out their payments and embedded financial services products. They're primarily operating as a hardware and software business with some referral revenue, and helped them build out embedded payments product that was a lot more lucrative, also just a much better product for the end customers, and was able to take advantage of some more modern infrastructure and do a lot more than just payments. So very quickly got into instant settlement, embedded lending, bank account issuing, card issuing, all for this hyper small SMB that meanwhile was commingling funds in their personal account. If they were trying to get a business checking account, it was going to take them, 3 months, and they might never end up doing it. And so it was just this host of value props that were all right, this is this is a way better way to provide financial services to this small business. And then from there, moved on to WorkWave, who's really a leader in, as you mentioned, field mobile services. And we specialize in like pest control, lawn care, landscape, cleaning, and security. And we offer CRM solutions. We offer like the routing and logistics solutions. We do payroll. We're an ERP. So just a lot of different ways to help these customers do financial services.
Such a fast growing space too. We support a number of platforms and field services, and it feels like it's just blowing up. Like the industry has woken up to this entire culture of businesses that have been underserved.
Yeah. I mean, we certainly feel that way. It's a really big space. There are so many verticals in field services. There's so many different types of needs. So I think, it's one of those spaces that's just like super interesting. And they're still pretty early. There's a lot of, older generations of business owners. There's a lot of like M&A, and there's a lot of change happening and like excitement around like, hey, let's take advantage of some of these more software first solutions.
Well, it's similar to what you were talking about with Square, and love the parallel there, because Square really came in and kind of that micro SMB, right? When they hit the scene, and folks that really wouldn't have ever thought about accepting a credit card, because you wander in your bank and try to get a merchant account from the merchant services sales team, and they would have laughed you out of the building because you're selling CDs on the side of the road or something, and they found that funny. And I think in the same way, field services, one or two man shop, kind of working out of a truck, whether it's landscaping or mobile detailing or whatever it is. And access to mobile or to financial services is pretty limited when you don't have brick and mortar and a lot of money in the bank, and, a lot of
Years of business
inventory
history.
or, yeah, I love that. Also, always really fun to hear. You could tell when people have been in payments forever because they reference things like, oh, yeah, when, the eBay PayPal merger, or when Square came in. And I was working at a wholesale ISO when Square was doing all of those things. And I'm like, why do I have to do PCI? And they do not have to do PCI. I'm sure you remember a lot of those same thoughts.
Yeah, just totally transformative.
Yeah.
And there was like the denial at the time, right? Like I remember, some of our leadership team being like, "Oh, this is nonsense. Like this is not a threat at all." 6 months later, it's like, "Well, here's our strategy. Like this is how we're going to take over." Yeah, it was a fun time, and it was like such the beginning, and I feel like it's only in the last couple of years that it's really taken hold. Like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
this kind of model applies in so many different places.
Right. And what we're now all doing is taking this square model of like, and I love the phrase you're using, the in context financial services, but now instead of in this broad horizontal, we're saying, okay, but now for field services or healthcare or something, and taking the same kind of accessibility and in context with embedded payments. But I love the view you have because of your traditional banking and issuing and hardware and now embedded finance. But to talk about that perspective shift that you had as you moved from, I work at a massive bank doing standard financial services, to really kind of cutting edge embedded fintech.
When I was first getting started, I didn't know much. It was like exposure to a big industry and kind of like the bank way of doing things. One of the I mean, obviously you had like, that like Square, hey, this is really breaking the mold. Another big like aha moment for me was like I was at JP Morgan. I was doing this issuing product, and we were selling to direct corporates, making it easier for them to pay their accounts payable. And it was like, a fine product and a nice like monetization strategy, help their finance departments, but you're still doing this like annoying implementation process. These companies are like having to export data out of their ERP so that you can underwrite the deal, so that you can price them. And then we started having these platform deals come along. And it was like, hey, we already bank the ERP, right? We bank Workday, or we bank, Hyphen Solutions or whomever. Why don't we just do the deal right there and let them be the distributor? And so I think like so much of this stuff, just like the mindset shift, is this platform that's in the context where the work is being done is in such a better place to deliver the solution, to price the solution,
Yeah.
to build the experience in a way that resonates with those users, so that it's not, you could be a finance department, and you could like force on your AP department, like, hey, we want to use this tool now because we see like we're going to get a big rebate from it. But that's still like, you're not going to get as good usage. You're not going to get, as much efficiency out of it, because you're still kind of providing a clunky experience. And so for me, it was just like the work is being done in these software platforms. Like that's really where the distribution of these solutions needs to come from. And, and then it's like, that's like only scratches the surface. Once you're there, it's like, hey, okay, WorkWave's version of field services like is really focused on field services with a subscription bend, recurring service like lawn care and like
Hmm.
pest control. That's different than, plumbing and electrical work, which is much more one time. And so there's like a million reasons that matters, right? You're going to focus in your payments product on helping this customer do recurring billing, have more of a Netflix model where account updater is a huge part of our value prop. How many times have you updated your card for Netflix in the past 15 years? You never have. Meanwhile,
Right.
like AT&T still requires you to go update your card if your card goes out. Like, so that's how we think about the payments product that we need to provide.
It's funny because there's a common misconception, and I've assumed have seen this a lot. I know I have, through consulting and the platforms we work with. It like you just like plug in payments, like you just bolt it on and everything just works. Like let's just make money from payments. And I think we get a lot of this messaging from the investment community. Like I love their support, but I think I think it's more nuanced than that. From what you've seen in your own experience, like what separates good from the rest? What do our listeners who are software platforms, what do they need to get right if they want to drive real revenue from payments or embedded finance?
I think the direct answer is like you really got to put your whole organization around it. And you got to think like this is not just like a partnership integration that I'm plugging in. Like this is a new product that's going to be a really meaningful part of my P&L and add huge value to my customer base. And so I want to do, and maybe it's not the first phase, but my vision is to do everything right. I want to be able to offer a better payments product that offers more value to my customers. I want to make sure that the implementation is best in class for the industry. And then I want to be able to sell the crap out of it. Like, I think you really have to be thinking about all of the arms of your organization that you want to support it if you want to have a best in class payments product. So I think what ends up happening a lot of the time, and maybe it's fine, payments isn't the first thing that you're thinking of when you're building a new vertical software platform. Find your way into it, become aware of it. And there are like partnerships that you can do, integrations that you can set up pretty lightweight, and you can build like a really nice kind of partner business. And that can be an easy path that gets you, depending on the platform and the space in the industry, maybe 20%, maybe up to like 50% attachment at unoptimized economics. But like, hey, that feels great. Like while it's happening, what I see is like so many platforms sort of get to that space and they're like, oh, okay, we've really stalled out. Like, how do we take this to the next step?
Yeah.
And I think that can be where it's really hard because the first step was like, relatively speaking, pretty easy. You didn't put a lot of investment in. You might not have even like hired, full-time dedicated folks for it. And it's the next phase that's like, okay, I see that I'm only a third of the way towards my potential, but in order to get the next 2/3, it's going to take twice the work that I've put in already. And I actually don't really know where to begin because I've really been relying on external partners for most of this expertise. And so how do I build conviction around how I'm going to get to the next stage?
Yeah, and it feels like what most of the time, or at least when I'm talking with folks, they've got to that, third or whatever, and they've stalled out. And they go, okay, here's what we're going to do: marketing campaign. Like, we're going to do the best worded email campaign and like price incentives, or we're going to spiff our sales group. And that doesn't feel like quite the right approach.
Yeah.
And so I always think, you need to start with the product, but what advice for folks that have hit that stalled? Like, what are the levers? Like, I agree, a lot more investment than they're probably imagining. And the ROI is obviously there, but what levers do you think they should look at pulling first if it's not just like, let's do a really great email campaign? Like, nothing wrong with email campaigns, but that's generally not going to get you from a third to the 90% or, plus that you're really kind of looking for in terms of adoption.
I think, like, as you said, it's about the product and it's like, how does this really reinforce like what I'm doing overall as a business? How does this really support my value proposition? And how can I build a product that does that? One of the things that we see in our industries at WorkWave is they're more oriented towards subscription. And there's like benchmarks, top decile, of these types of field services businesses are doing like 80% of their revenue as a subscription. It's the best performers. What are most of these companies doing? And it might be 40, 50, 60%. So what can we do with our payments product to be able to identify, look at all the data that we've got and look at the payments data and say, hey, you're at 40%, the benchmark is 80%. Here are the customers that aren't on a subscription that we think have a propensity to be. Here's like the script to go after with them. It's sell the subscription. Why is that going to be better for them? All right, turn them on to auto pay, get a card on file. That card on file is secured with account updater. Oh, by the way, at the end of all this, like this is like a very actively acquisitive industry. We see, buyers are paying twice as much for an 80% subscription company at the same revenue, same profit than they are for a 40% subscription company. So that's why this is so important. And that's how this product is really like changing the way that your company is valued, your potential for, an exit or a success. So like just really tying all like what is their goal and what can your payments and financial services do to really drive their goal.
Yeah. And, we've talked a lot about payments and obviously my favorite topic, but there's so much more here to embedded finance. And I think you're in a great place to speak to our listeners about that. But if you were to kind of zoom out, is payments always the first step people should take with embedded fintech? Or are there scenarios where they really should think about a different type of fintech product as their entrance? Maybe kind of what are the guiding principles?
I definitely think payments is like most of the time what the obvious answer is, but there are definitely plenty of examples where payments or payment acceptance specifically isn't the first fintech product I'd go after. I like to build a Sankey diagram of like what does the customer profile look like? What are the revenues of all of the platform's customers, and what are the expenses of all the platform's customers? And then like what data do we as the platform have access to that means that we've got a right to win on accounts receivable, revenue management, or accounts payable. And then like further break those down a little bit more. Maybe your accounts receivable is like all consumer and you've got, you're already doing the invoicing, and that would be a really good indication that like you're going to have tremendous success with a payments product. But maybe your AR is like all B2B and you're also like not doing the invoicing, somebody else is doing the invoicing, but you are the ERP and you've got all the accounts payable data, or you've got the payroll data. Then that's what I would suggest. Like maybe there's somewhere else that you should start. So it's sort of like look at the Sankey diagram. Where's your product suggest that you've got you're in a position to build a really powerful like workflow, and then what are the monetization options on those different workflows from a payments and fintech perspective? And a lot of companies who like might be in the ERP space or in the payroll space, like might not have as much, insight into, hey, how do I monetize accounts payable? What are the additional monetization levers on like a payroll front? But I think like, thinking about it that way, thinking about the funds flows that you're sort of in the vicinity of, and then getting better educated about like what your options are to monetize those things. On accounts payable, right? You can help these customers pay, and you can, help them use things like cards or monetizable payment instruments to pay their bills, and you can do it while making their accounts payable flow easier. There's like opportunities in like the real estate market where, escrow is a big thing. And so there's like fund management types of opportunities that you see. And then like all sorts of asset, in the broader like field services world, like there's different types of companies that sort of like help with the fleet management part of that business. And they might not be actually supporting the fleet expense, but they're like the best source of all of the data about that fleet, what money is being spent on it, where the fraud is. And so like, maybe there's a fleet card kind of opportunity in those types of spaces. So
Yeah. What are the signals for like embedded lending or insurance or banking as a service? Like what are some of the things that you would see within a platform that would make it feel like those were the right places to go next?
I think on embedded lending, like, payments is first on most embedded lending. You have a solid like view on the revenues that your customers are making. And then like to me, the real limitation on embedded lending today is like it's still a relatively expensive product, and it's still like a relatively small dollar value loan that's pretty inflexible. So like, I'm not seeing huge market success yet in like up market embedded lending propositions. I think it's still mostly like, sub $2 million a year, sub $3 million a year businesses. So like if I'm looking at a platform and they're banking enterprise customers that are 10 million to 100 million in revenue, like embedded lending is probably a great fit. And likewise, the sort of on the treasury side, on the banking side, and like what we had success with at EPOS now was like if you're going to try to like disrupt the treasury business or the commercial banking business for your customers, down market, it's a lot easier to do than up market. I think up market, it's about like picking off specific cash flows, right? So maybe because you're invoicing and you've got visibility into the sales tax, you can help, a customer by collecting sales tax, paying sales tax, indemnifying them from tax issue, late payments, those types of things. And so that's sort of like a wedge in. All right, let's do something easy like tax. Then maybe we work on accounts payable or payroll banking. But I think to me, that's sort of how you break into like more disrupting treasury management as you go up market. Down market, it's just like, hey, don't commingle funds. You shouldn't do this. You want to keep your business and your personal account separate. We can help you keep track of all of your business expenses. That's going to be a huge benefit for you, just like from a stress perspective. And it's also going to help you save some money at tax time.
Yeah, and it seems like most platforms are kind of dipping their toes. They're either doing payments to some extent and are kind of looking at embedded finance. What percentage of the market do you think is like really trying to tackle the like, we're going to be our customer's bank? Like we're going to do all flows and kind of really not just disrupt, but like we are their commercial banking partner. What segment of, obviously just anecdotally, but do you think are really kind of looking at and trying to tackle that?
Like less than 1%, or
Yeah.
actually have that in mind as like a target state. I think way less than 1%. I think the vast majority of like embedded banking success that's happening right now is like, sure, we'll try that out because the market and the vendor marketplace has made it easy enough that it's really low risk for me. I think there's so much opportunity because I think 99.9% of software platforms out there aren't thinking, holy cow, I could be like the full service financial institution for this customer base. And I don't have to be a bank to be that. I can be the distributor of those financial services super tailored. That's how I think of where the world's going to be in 10 or 20 years. But I think it's only a handful of companies that are really thinking that way.
And do you think more should be, or do you think that the technology and the compliance, landscape is just not quite ready for a banking relationship to exist entirely within a software platform?
I think more should be. I think there's a ton of opportunity there, but I get like there's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't be. And there's a ton of challenges, that every one of us are trying to solve just within our software ecosystems. I think one of the other issues or reasons why this isn't so top of mind for a lot of software platforms is because like your customers aren't really asking for it. In their minds, like you're my software provider and my bank is my bank. And like I'm not really looking to my software provider to be my bank. And that's not because they don't want that to happen, but it's because it's just not how they think about things. And so, like one of the things that we're definitely seeing success with at WorkWave as we do more and more financial services is starting to create more of that reputation as like a financial service provider. So I think there's all the potential in the world, but can't imagine when it's going to be, hey, POS, like, how come you're not my treasury management platform?
Why can't you do my payroll? Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it's funny because it seems like not even all software platforms are really kind of even fully bought onto payments. Like, while I think we're kind of over the hill on that, and there's a lot more that are doing it that aren't, we still aren't fully kind of penetrated there. And so then go the full next step and go, okay, not only do we want you to do payments, but we also, right, this suite of other services. And it seems like part of what's missing, the ROI on accepting payments, I think, is super clear, right? I think the payments business has done a lot to kind of show owners and investors and merchants and kind of, demonstrate the value of that and the ROI. But it feels like people are still trying to figure out monetization on, accounts payable and banking as a service. And that still feels like it's under development. Do you see the same thing? Or do you feel like people are really starting to get their hands wrapped around what that looks like?
No, I mean, I think you're 100% right. Part of the reason why I think payments has gotten to where it is you've got such a good spectrum of payment solutions now that you've got like payment solutions that can just help you get off the ground, that maybe the economics like aren't amazing, but like you're getting off the ground in a really easy way. And then you've got like tons of vendors who are out there being like, hey, I can help you, triple that revenue that you're getting per merchant if you go about it in this way. And I think like for most of the other financial services, there's a lot more that you have to build to get there.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, yeah, all right, then you got to go, you got a great referral partner, then you got to go build something really like complex with a bank to double or triple that. Yeah, that's sort of where I think we're at.
Yeah. So, obviously part of what keeps software platforms from heading into this, even into payments, is just kind of the complexities. And so they think about hiring, some sort of dedicated payments leader. What do you think that stage is where a software platform should say, hey, this isn't a project somebody's running off the side of their desk, or like we've got a partnership, person that's running this payment integration. We really need somebody dedicated. What stage is that where that's a really obvious, yes, you should go do that?
I think it kind of depends on what kind of management, investor, ownership model you're in. For a lot of private equity owned companies, like the P&L's got to justify that you can actually have somebody dedicated to that. And it's a little bit of a catch 22 because like you got to
You're
get
going
to a
to have
decent
the P&L
size.
to support it until you have somebody in there to build it. And yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But on the other hand, with payments and partnerships, if you've got enough scale through your customer base, like a lot of companies can get pretty far and at least get to the point of having a P&L that kind of justifies a leader. I think there's also like, there are sort of payments first software companies that are like, hey, we're going to market. And like a big part of how we're going to be a successful software company is we don't have to convince people to pay this big SaaS fee. And I think a lot of those companies become more payments literate just as a function of like necessity. Like they had to learn how to, manage like a usage based bookings model very early on. And when you're in the other seat and you're like, oh, we have always been software, we've been software first, we sort of like found our way into payments at some level. Now you're head of payments or head of fintech, if they really want to like expand that business, has a lot of things that they've got to convince the broader organization with a lot of different types of changes that that company's just not used to and doesn't have any muscle doing. And so, yeah, it's kind of like different challenges and different probably talent profiles that you're looking for and a different sort of scale that you need to be at to make that investment.
Yeah, from some strongly held opinions on what makes a good head of payments or GM of payments, because I've been them and I've helped hire them and I've consulted with them. So, I love the community of good head of payments, but it feels like one of the most important things that they do is this cultural transformation work that you were kind of just talking about. This developing company muscle around seeing payments as not a plug-in that we've got over here in the partnership division, but really part of the DNA. And so a good head of payments is, familiar with and has experience in this kind of cultural work. But what else do you think like companies should be looking for when they're hiring this role?
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that is like the top criteria. I think that's the most important thing, the most important place that you can add value as a payments leader. I guess I see sort of like two shapes of payments leader, and then like the ideal in my mind is kind of the hybrid. But like on the one hand, I see like payments person all their lives, like has been on the ISO side, like deep payments expertise, and not a lot of product and like software platform kind of expertise. One of the good things about that is like a really strong sense and understanding of like payments economics, what interchange is, what scheme fees is, what like the optimization opportunities are. But I sort of see like the ultimate manifestation of that is, that individual's North Star is like, well, I just got to get direct to Visa and MasterCard. Like if I do that, like that is the goal. And then on the other side, I see like payments leader who's always been in software. And I think like maybe has a really strong view on the product and can sort of like articulate that North Star and probably because they're starting there, maybe has an easier time on the cultural side, but the negotiations could be pretty weak. And so you've got more opportunity if that's sort of like where you're at to scale that business, via doing better optimization, taking more control of the product, the pricing, the contract model. Yeah, I think the ideal situation is you've got somebody who like really understands the commercials and the economics, all of the nuance and complexity of just like payments and financial services infrastructure, but they're also really, really product driven. In my mind, you're always going to get more value building better product than you are like shaving off a few basis points because you've figured out that you got commercial card optimization opportunity.
Yeah. Volume beats margin every day, in my opinion. And so the math obviously plays that out, but this kind of idea, the perfect head of payments, and you think about how cross-functional this really is, right? Like expert in, payments, and then you've got sales motions and product and support, and it really is wearing a lot of hats. When I was a consultant and now here at Rainforest, it's one of the things that we do kind of more than anything is kind of help fill gaps wherever those exist, right? So this head of payments, this unicorn we just described, doesn't exist. So do you need help with go to market? Do you need help with interchange analysis, right? Are we going to come in and start to fill that? And however companies are looking to do that, obviously your processing or your embedded finance vendor, as much as you can try to find some of that expertise there versus just a straight up process my payments kind of vendor.
Yeah.
I think you can kind of round out that internally, if you don't find that perfect unicorn that checks all the boxes, which I
Yeah.
think we both agree doesn't quite exist, but
If you're picking good partners and you're learning a lot from your partners and you're building those relationships and you're going into those partnerships like, hey, how do we do something that's really going to be mutually beneficial for the long term? I think you can fill a lot of those gaps, right? Like a just genuinely curious person who like sort of sees the opportunity and like, has some flexibility to go like work with partners and pick interesting partners and isn't sort of boxed into whatever the IBM of payments is today. I think that can go so far.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, I love everything that we've covered today. And I'm going to ask the impossible question, which is like, distill all of your experience. So take a lifetime of payment knowledge and like if you could say one piece of advice or kind of distill this experience for SaaS leaders, like how would you distill that down in an advice form?
Start with the product. What's the best product that you could possibly make for these customers that's going to help reinforce everything else about what the software platform or product already does? Understand that like this is completely multidimensional and is going to hit every aspect of the business, and then like really support the transformation towards that. Get familiar with like the payments business at some level. And I guess it's sort of like advice more to, the CEOs and leadership teams that are like thinking about hiring for, evaluating that opportunity. It's like that GM payments leader is not going to be successful if the rest of the organization is kind of like, yeah, do your thing in your corner. They've got to be really supported. One homework assignment that I give to like all of our, leadership team and as far to like get educated on payments is the Acquired episode about Visa. I think that's just like such a good 101 on, hey, what is this payments industry and what is card processing? So yeah.
I love it. That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time and all of the great advice today. We've loved having you on the show.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks so much, Becky.